Da, da, theme song, theme song. Da, da, da. Welcome back to A Thousand Eyes in One podcast. I'm Tanya.
And I'm Nikki. Welcome back.
Tonight, of course, we're talking about House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 2, The Rogue Prince. To find previous episodes, go to thousandeyespodcast.com. You can also find us on YouTube, A Thousand Eyes in One podcast. And if you'd like to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter as Thousand Eyes One, Facebook and Instagram, A Thousand Eyes in One. If you're interested in our speculative fiction book club, that is Wine on an Empty Stomach on Instagram. Thoughts about the episode?
It's a brand new intro with the same old song. I don't know, because they always do that, right? Where they just like go into it and then they've often done that and they bring the intro in for the second episode.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was like very surprised, but also comforted by the fact that it's still the Game of Thrones theme song that we love so much. But seeing the rivers of blood rushing through
The
was
blood of the dragon, right?
ooh, yeah.
At first, I
I was
couldn't
really
figure
excited
out
about
the
it.
symbols, but then I saw one of them was a crown. I saw one was Hand of the King. And you remember
Mhm.
how in Game of Thrones, they used to, the opening would tell you basically what regions you're going to be in? I'm trying to
Right.
figure out what they're telling us with this, but this is the first time they've used it. So we'd
Yeah.
have to
I
wait
had
and
a hard
see.
time figuring out. It's just like at the very end, you have like the Targaryen sigil and then all the like the rivers of blood coming from everywhere pouring down into like the well-like thing. So I couldn't really figure it out. But the other thing I was trying to figure out was, is what we're looking at King's Landing, or is that Old Valyria, like similar to the model that Viserys is building? Because we found out obviously in this episode that it wasn't King's Landing, it was Valeria that he was modeling his little
Yeah, yeah,
sculpture
we thought it
monument.
was King's Landing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was
So,
Old Valyria. Um, I would guess Old Valyria.
mhm. Yeah, I have to watch it again and like actually pay attention and maybe try to like mind map it to what he's got on his table.
Yeah,
Um, but it was fun. I was happy. It's just like, how can you listen to that or hear that theme song and not get gas?
I know, I know. I was
Like
I was
I can
actually
never skip it.
no, me neither. I was surprised that they reused the theme. I thought they would have done like a new one that was like all Targaryen.
Yeah, I thought so too. It's because like in the trailers that they released, it was different music, and so I thought that, oh, okay, they're gonna have a different song for this. But I guess like as a franchise, it makes sense to keep the
Yeah,
same
people are
music.
gonna hear it and it's gonna evoke hopefully good memories.
Hmm.
of
Good to see if your child comes running out to listen to the theme only and then goes back to hear
yeah,
the theme
right?
like it used to be. Oh, cool. Yeah, loved it. Happy. Kragos, crab feeder.
Kraga's crab feeder. So that opening with just, people being eaten up by crabs, some still
Yeah.
living, that was
I thought the
horrendous.
Boltons were bad.
I know, right? Um, so we see that that's a threat. Remember, we had talked about
Mhm.
Corliss being right that there is a threat
Right.
coming. Um, but that was like a really quick shot, and then we just jump right out of it. It reminded me of the beginning of season one, episode one, Game of Thrones,
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
they're beyond the wall and it's like this huge threat, and then it just jumps back to the north, and we kind of
Mhm.
forget about that threat.
Yeah,
It reminded me of
yeah.
that. Like we start with this horrendous murders and
Hmm.
this really graphic scene, and then we jump into needing a new Kingsguard, and then you kind of forget
Yeah.
about it until you come back to it later.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good thing to pick up on, because like as we leave there and we go back to a small council meeting, and what the theme that I've kind of like picked up on is that everything like let's make haste, let's hastily pick a choose a new heir, let's hastily nominate a new member to the King's Guard, let's hastily propose a new queen in a marriage. But what about the threats that are actually threats to the realm, the real threats, not like the kind of internal ones? And Yeah,
Yeah, it
get
does
a
seem
lot of
like they're
that. It's
being
like you forget about it. It's like we're introduced to the main problem, and then once again we're swept away, and we're like, oh yeah, okay, that thing that's happening in the north, or that thing that's happening on those beaches and the stepstones, whatever. We'll get back to that.
yeah, it seems frivolous. I mean, it's
I mean,
important.
but that's how politics works in real life, right? Though,
Yeah.
like, there's this impendent, like, here we are. I mean, name problem, right? These things that are like at the, that should be at the forefront of our minds, but then we get caught up in the mundane things that are troubling our actual everyday life that directly impact us immediately.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not that it's unimportant to discuss
Mhm.
who the heir is gonna be and,
Mhm.
the king remarrying. Obviously, those are things that need to be discussed, but they focus so heavily on that while ignoring other threats. And you see it in Corliss's
Right.
frustration. You see how frustrated he is. He
Mhm.
storms into the room, which, don't expect a lord to do to the king, just storm into the room angrily
Mhm.
and demand something be done. And it
Isn't that
seems,
he's taking a personal L, right? It's not just
yeah,
like these are any ships. Now this is his money that
right,
they're messing with.
right. But he also doesn't want, remember, he said he doesn't want compensation. He wants something done
Mhm.
because,
Mhm.
as he says later, it will cripple his house. So that's personal. But also,
Mhm.
it's seeming like it really is a threat to the kingdom. It also seems like he and Otto have a rivalry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they think the same thing of each other.
Mm,
I think that Otto thinks I think Otto understands that Corlys has a direct like line to the like he's a cousin, right?
right.
He's a cousin. And so Otto just like assumes that he like this kind of relationship and hold on, I'm not getting this right. But the what I'm trying to say here clumsily is that Otto wishes he had the same type of access, and he does have the degree of access because he's the hand of the king. Corlys sees Otto looking at him like, okay, you're the hand of the king. Obviously, you can say things into his ears, and like your position is that of someone who can influence him. But he's, is maybe relying on the bloodline, and I believe that there is some kind of rivalry there for sure. They do a good job of keeping it kind of like unspoken and just like acted it through glances.
And the question keeps coming up, is Viserys a weak king?
Hmm.
And so a king who allows someone to storm into a council meeting and make demands, and I get that Viserys is trying to avoid bloodshed, and I guess that applies to all things, not just open
Hmm.
war, but within his own castle. Because you think,
Hmm.
when think back to last episode when the Baratheon said to Lady Rhaenys, Princess Rhaenys
Right.
rather, queen who never was, and Otto's like, you can have his tongue for that. You know, he
Right.
he he kind of he kind of writes things off, which I don't think he's wrong for doing. But
Hmm.
it asks the question of, is he a weak king? Do the people
Yeah.
rather do the people see him as a weak king?
As a weak king, right? Because I feel like Otto's constantly like stoking the flames, He's like fanning the flames and being like, "Oh, hey, you gonna let that slide, bro? You gonna let that slide?"
Right. And
And
that
I at that,
and
my
that
note
that
here just
shows,
says
like,
"fuck Otto."
the fact that he's, stoking that fire. It also shows why he feels so comfortable pimping out his
Hmm.
daughter to him and
Yeah.
trying to um essentially stake his claim that way,
Yeah.
his direct line
Totally.
to the crown. And
Yeah.
I remember in our primer video, we talked about how other lords thought that Lord Hightower was reaching too high. And now we
Hmm.
see that. We see that he
We
is
see
reaching
that.
high because
We.
Corlys, I think, is half Targaryen anyway, married to a
Hmm.
Targaryen, the master of ships, the richest man in the realm. And Otto is a Hightower, which is an important family, but not the same standing. And so
Yeah.
presenting someone who doesn't have the same, what's the word,
Cloud
credentials,
status. Hmm.
and Alice meaning Allison,
Hmm.
it is a it is a bit
As a yeah.
it is a bit high reaching.
It is, and it's funny that because like in Fire and Blood, they say that they thought that uh Sir Otto was reaching high and above the station, but in the show we keep hearing Otto saying that about Lord Corlys.
Right. And you know what else it reminds me of? The story of Tywin wanting to marry Cersei to Rhaegar, and
Yes.
Aerys basically being like, I'm not marrying my kid to the help.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I've seen people online comparing Corlys to Tywin, but I don't really see that connection. And I mean, Otto to Tywin, and I only
Mhm.
see it in the reaching part, but Tywin was also like the richest, and he
Right.
was cunning, and I see Otto as cunning, but I guess we've only known him
He's
now for two
cunning, yeah.
episodes.
But it's yeah, we've only known him for 2 episodes, but like,
Tywin was on another level. Just
yeah,
orchestrating
I
the
wouldn't
red wedding
compare.
was like a whole,
Oof,
I
yeah.
mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, the red wedding, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought I had the
Hmm.
wrong one.
Yeah, it's like all what we see from him is like, okay, well, where you're planting like little seeds in the king's ear, and we know that you're trying to pimp out your daughter, uh, because maybe you do see the king as a weak king, and you know that if your daughter is on, if you're basically if the king will die, your daughter will be the queen, one of her sons
Will
through
be
the
the
king
heir.
will be the heir, and that means that they will likely name you hand of the king or regent,
Right.
and through that he gets to be king,
Mhm.
which I think should be prevented at all costs.
Yeah, you have to be wary. I mean, the way he presses on about who's the heir, it almost sounds like he's gonna murder him.
Hmm.
Do you think that Viserys should have taken Rhaenyra's advice and sent dragon riders to the Stepstones?
I think that he should not have dismissed her because he named her his heir, and if she had been a boy, she would have been allowed to remain in the room and just would have been schooled and been like, hey, well maybe that let's weigh out your option and point out the faults that weigh out your plan and like let's think about what the pros and cons of this. But because she's a woman, I think that she was like, oh, that's really cute, baby, no, sweetie, like now please go pick a knight to protect you,
But again, that was
right? I
Otto's
think
work.
yes.
That was
But
Otto's work.
he
And
let
he
it
let
go.
it
He should
go.
have
And
told her
again,
he let
so
it
he
go.
let it go. Is he a weak king for letting it go?
She
That's his heir. Shouldn't
it,
his heir be in on meetings? I mean, she's almost of age.
right, and that's what I'm saying. If she was a boy, that she would have been allowed to stay to remain in the room. And it's I think that it's very clever of the show to keep presenting these things because the book makes very clear that he does not like conflict.
Yeah.
Right? He's always avoiding conflict. He just kind of wants to placate everybody. Do I think they should have sent dragon riders? I think sending dragon riders would have maybe have been a little bit too hasty. Um, and I think they want to save dragon fighting for later, obviously. But I think that her willingness to, take up arms speaks a lot to her,
To her nature.
to her nature. I don't think they should have sent like a crew of dragon riders, but I think that they should have maybe considered it and recognized it as a teaching moment for your heir.
I haven't decided yet if they should send dragon riders because I guess it really depends on the outcome and I can like
Mm-hmm.
decide in hindsight. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, these dragons are essentially like nuclear bombs. They just like destroy everything, and it could be too much to just go in and just start destroying without some kind of evidence. But at the same time, sending an envoy to, confer with pirates doesn't really seem like a
Mm-hmm.
great idea either. Or
Yeah,
unless he sent
to
them
stop them
to the
from taking it.
Triarchs.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the sense that I got, that he sent them to the Triarchs, not to the Stepstone.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess you could send the Dragon Riders just as a threat without actually burning everyone up to
Hmm.
remind, he could have reminded people of his power in that way because he's not a Dragon Rider,
Yeah,
which
sure.
might be
Instead, he
another
never
reason
took
why
another
people,
dragon.
oh, what was that?
I was like, his Valerian is dead, and he never took another dragon.
Right. And so I wonder if him not being a dragon rider is another reason why people see him as a weak king. So it's like his
Maybe.
aversion to violence, how easily he's swayed, it seems, in some
Mhm.
matters, I guess not all. And he doesn't ride a dragon.
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
problem.
Damon is Damon, and
Mm.
people like that.
Yeah, we'll get to him. Oh man, you did notice that his finger's still bandaged, so
Yes,
keep
like
that.
to
So
the
keep that.
knuckle.
Mm.
So he's not healing. You think Otto's poisoning him? to keep him from
Ooh.
healing.
Ooh.
Let me secure my tinfoil hat, get that in place.
Ooh.
It makes me think of Oberyn and the idea
Mm-hmm.
that floats around, the theory that he had been poisoning Tywin all along.
Right.
So maybe Otto's been poisoning him to keep him from healing. I don't know. I don't know how
That
he'd
would be
pull it off,
that
but hey,
would
I wouldn't hold it.
yeah,
I
I wouldn't
wouldn't.
hold against him. Yeah.
So
Oh
this
man.
dragon breaking and falling, I was like, okay, the destruction of the dragons. And then later
Yeah,
on,
hold
we
on a
see
second. I'm trying to figure out where that is right
that's when
now.
Viserys
Sorry, go
is
ahead.
giving Alicent the history lesson,
Right, right, right.
and he drops the dragon and it shatters.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, the decline of dragons, like the dragon falling and
Yeah,
breaking, or not, rather
yeah.
the decline of the Targaryens, not the decline of dragons
The
specifically.
dragons, right. Yeah, the decline of their reign because it's like you're explaining, you're giving her the history lesson about the old seat of power, right? And
Right.
then to drop the thing that gives you the power in the first place.
I know,
Foreshadowing.
right? And right as he's saying, like, they don't have the same number of dragons that they had in the Freehold, that they
Hmm.
had thousands back then, or 1,000. And now,
Hmm.
what do they
It's
have?
just a
Like
thousand.
six or something? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Maybe more.
It's just that. And then I'm just like, we find out in this episode that this basically 6 months has passed since the first episode. So he's been having secret meetings with Allison
For
for
six
6 months,
months.
and his daughter doesn't know. And I will mention that just like as a note, it's not quite green that she's wearing, but it gives green enough for me.
Well, the green and the versus the blacks thing was it
Mhm.
was an event. So we'll probably see
It-
that later, either
I
later
can't
in the
wait.
season or later in the series.
I
Because I
can't
don't know
wait.
how slow this is gonna move.
I don't know. We're gonna skip 6 months of time.
Yeah.
Is it the
And
Gendry pace?
it looks like next episode it's gonna skip years in time.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Let's you know what I wanted to talk about real quick is just how even though Otto is the hand, he has to, to some degree respect that Rhaenyra is the heir when she's like when they're choosing the King's Guard, because she's like, she sizes them all up and she's like, listen, you guys have only had practice, you sweet children of summer. You've never actually fought in a real war, and that's how she lands on, well, that's one of the reasons she lands on Sir Kristen Cole. But she
Also
like
because
checks
she
him and
thought he
she
was
was like,
cute.
oh. Well, yeah, obviously.
I thought he was
I like
cute
how
too.
she checks him. I did too. She's like, which one don't you want my father to be protected by somebody who has actual experience, not
Right.
just like, oh,
Capturing
some guys
poachers.
walking poachers. Like, and the poacher was just like walking down the road with his bag over his shoulder, and he was like, oh, got him.
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
like
they
how much
probably ride
effort is.
around looking for stuff to do because what does a knight do when there's no fighting?
Mm-hmm. Hashtag hedge name. Free Dunkin' egg. Yeah, she's like, let's get on with the investiture, which is my opportunity to talk about Stormlight Archive. I'll just mention it. Okay, moving on.
It, I don't know, it meant something to me when
Hmm.
Rhaenyra said to Alicent that her father didn't choose her as heir, he spurned Daemon.
Yeah,
Because it seems
yeah.
like at first, we don't know what's happened in these 6 months really, except that their
Hmm.
relationship has been strained.
Yeah,
And so
they
maybe
don't
in the
talk to each
beginning,
other.
she thought he did choose her, but as time goes on and she sees what's going on around her,
Hmm.
she realizes, nope, he's just pissed at his brother.
Pissed at his brother. And I mean, I think that, like, I imagine that this incident in the small council meeting where she was sent to go do something else because she interrupted or, saw an opportunity to speak up and present her idea. Like, I don't think it's the first time. Like
Right,
obviously we don't see it, but I think that it's a habitual offense. And so of course she's gonna feel like that. Damon hasn't come back. We know that he's doing these things. Like we know that she hears him talking about Damon, and Damon's being a petulant child and he's just trying to piss me off. Whatever, whatever. We have a new heir anyway. Like, how's that supposed to make her feel?
right.
She's not being trained in, matters of the realm other than pouring wine for people.
Which is a departure from the books because I believe in the books it said that he
Oh
kept her
yeah,
at this, he always had her at the small council meetings
he always
so
had
that
her at
she
the
could
small council
learn.
meetings.
So it's interesting that they made this choice. And
Yeah,
I guess, we'll see
people don't know.
what comes of
Yeah.
it.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's lots of interesting choices I think that they've made in this episode, and I'm wondering where they will lead. Yeah.
When Corlys offered up his daughter for marriage, and then later we see them together, I know we said that, like, we know that times were different in this universe and in that time period, that things are different and girls get married young. But
Mhm.
seeing this old man walking around with this child who is in a training bra and
Mm.
whose voice hasn't changed and is like 4 feet tall was
Oh, maybe.
was a little bit disturbing.
It was. You're like, oh man, really? That's how it's gonna go down? Like, and then she has like the little like innocent child talk in the beginning, like, tell me about Vagar. Where's Vagar? We don't know
Yeah,
where Vagar is,
because she's a kid.
and then to transition into the prepared speech from her father about how our bloodlines should reunite and we'll be strong and I'll bear you many children and let's it was just like, ooh.
I wonder if
Mm.
that's a nod also at Emma
Hmm.
because he married Emma when she was really young, where they
Yeah,
also
she
again
met on
had to
Flower
wait.
Jet.
Yeah, he had to wait to consummate a couple years. And so I guess we're seeing that now with Lena. I don't recall. So I didn't reread Fire and Blood for this. I haven't
Hmm.
reread it actually in a long time, and that was on purpose because I didn't want to refer back to the book too much, and I also wanted to
Hmm.
kind of be surprised with what happens. Obviously, we know the show's going to change things,
Right.
which again I'm perfectly fine with, but um so I didn't reread it. So there's
Mhm.
little things that I can't remember. Like I don't remember if Lena was offered up in the books, but I do remember that um Emma was a child when he married her.
Yeah, I do remember that. I can't remember. I don't remember. Yeah,
I
no.
feel like
I
she
think
wasn't.
what I do remember is not worth talking about here, I guess, because then we're gonna there's Lena, there's Laenor, there's that whole thing.
Right, right,
Uh,
right.
um,
But Corliss wasn't
yeah,
wrong though,
no.
as far as
I
like
mean,
the
I think
benefits
the marriage makes sense.
politically. Yes.
Politically, it makes sense. Like this is like Joffrey marrying Marjorie.
Right. Like
It's the same.
politically it makes
Yeah.
sense. It's just the squeamishness of being old enough to be a grandfather and having to marry a 12-year-old.
If that, I don't. We don't even know how old she is,
Oh
but
no,
she's a
they do
villain.
say she's 12.
She's 12. Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
They say she's 12 later on, and we know that Rhaenyra is only 15.
Yeah,
So
a
like
woman
a
grown.
woman grown at 15. Oh, and she said she wouldn't have to bet her mother, Lena
Her
said her
mother
mother
said
told her she wouldn't have to bet him until she's 14. I was like
14. Yeah.
holding in my cringe. But
Yeah.
again, Corlys isn't wrong. It is a good match. They'd have pure Valyrian blood, which is a thing that Targaryens look
Hmm.
for, obviously, since they marry their
Hmm.
sisters.
Yeah.
Um, and then Corlys is so powerful and so rich, and he's the Navy.
He is the Navy, which I'm looking forward to talking about later.
What are the
He is
benefits
that.
of marrying Alicent? Because
Purchase her
Old
cricket
Town,
bear.
I know, Old Town in the time of Game of Thrones, we know that, well, at least in the books, we know that Old Town and the High Towers are very powerful and that
Right.
they've stayed out of like the War of the Five Kings and all that. But I don't know
Mhm.
how powerful Otto was and, and his family.
Yeah. I mean, he is, as far as we know, like he is the most powerful man right now in his family because he's been the hand for three kings,
Right.
right? He's like, this is his station. Yeah. But I don't know, like as a family, we don't really have
We don't have much
kind of a
information.
knowledge of the scope of their influence and power. And it's just like the way that he's being portrayed, it's just like, he's a social climber. He's giving a little bit of little finger. He's just trying to get to
Mm,
climb the ladder, climb the ladder, climb the ladder. Um, which is which is, fine and understandable. Like, I understand you want to like secure your house, and what better way to do it through a marriage? You've already planted your daughter in the position to have like where everybody else was sleeping on him getting an heir, you jumped in right away. Like marrying, like remarrying, he jumped in right away. It was like, you dress, go comfort the king. And like so for 6 months they've had this secret, relationship that's been or friendship or whatever you want to call it, um, blooming unbeknownst to everybody else. Uh,
It made me wonder again, which now I think less that he had slept with her before.
yeah, me too. Me
I
too.
wasn't sure last time because it absolutely seemed like that's what she was sent to do.
hmm But now I don't think so either.
Yeah, because I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it anymore. Like the way he talks to her and the way he treats her, it still feels very formal.
hmm
And so in this
It's like she's
case,
growing on him because there's
right.
that scene where he's sitting at his desk or his table by himself and he's just kind of like looking at the dragon and holding it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's the guy who's like he's starting to think about this chick, like.
Yeah. And so in this case, it looks like he's marrying for love,
Mm-hmm.
which always gets Targaryens into trouble. That's like their thing, marry for love and get in trouble. That's what
Yeah.
got Robb Stark into trouble,
hmm
marrying for love. So Viserys is gonna have to watch his back. And then when she gives him that dragon, again we saw the him dropping the dragon and breaking it. Then we see
hmm
Alicent returning it, put together and made
Put
whole.
together, foreshadowing of the heirs to come, perhaps. Wink, wink.
Nudge, nudge.
Oh
How
man,
gross was that maggot scene?
very gross. I think I even missed it this time. I like blocked it out, and I was like, "But does that really work? Are they really going to eat the rot?" I'm gonna have to do some research. Um, but very gross because like anytime you see maggots, it's disgusting, especially like in that number, the way like wriggle and writhe over each other. Blech.
Yeah, that was disgusting, and now I don't want to talk about it anymore. Anyway,
Well, let's talk about the princesses talking to each other.
okay.
Yeah. Rhaenys is sitting there. She's been kind of like keeping an eye on Rhaenyra. Like we see her when she's picking the new Kingsguard. We see her while she's watching her father
Mm-hmm.
stroll about the gardens, take a turn about the gardens
She's
with
just there
this
hanging out.
laugh,
She has no
you
duties.
know? No, what's the queen that never was doesn't get she gets to do nothing except for be rich. To be rich and wear fancy gowns and scowl at everybody. But yeah, but we see her just kind of hanging about. But she's given, I mean, what I like about Corliss and what I like about what we see also in Rhaenys is that like they're agents of straight talk. They
Mm-hmm.
are giving it to you. They will hit you with the real talk. They will tell you exactly what things are. And she's not afraid to tell Rhaenyra, like, listen, I know that you think that you have this thing that's coming to you, but you need to recognize what's happening. And not just because I'm like, whatever, it happened to me. I'm
Right.
telling you, this happened to me already. I have lived the life that you're living. I've walked in your shoes and I've had all my hopes and dreams dashed because some man came along, a boy was born, and that changed everything. And she's right to warn her, and she's right to tell her to keep an eye out on this because whew,
She's also
it's
right
what
to be cynical about the idea that suddenly the patriarchy is going to be turned upside down and now a woman will be queen because when has that there's never been
there's
anything even
never been
close.
one.
Not even just
No,
a
there's
queen, but like you in this time I don't think you hear about any women ruling their houses or anything like that. They're
mm-mm,
still kind of treated as broodmares, even Queen Emma. Even though, and
mm-hmm,
even when you look back at Queen Alysanne, as much as she gave input, she still didn't get to make full-on decisions.
yeah. I wish we could have seen her. I
Me
hope we,
too.
I'd love her in a flashback.
I would have loved to have a series about the conquest,
Mm-hmm,
like starting
me
with
too.
old Valyria and them leaving and then jumping forward in time. Like so like starting with like showing them and then Daenerys the Dreamer and then just jump forward in
Mm-hmm,
time to them settling on Dragonstone and like
yeah.
Aegon trying to suddenly getting this idea and then it's just like the
Isn't
conquest
that the,
over episodes. Like I would have loved to have that.
yeah, me too. Isn't that they like they were maybe planning for that and that's an idea that got sacked?
I don't know. I'm gonna have
Can't
to just
remember.
make it up in my head and watch it in my mind.
It'll be better, I promise. Yeah. So we have Rhaenys reminding her just like, to remember her station, like, and just the nature of men and men who are ruling. Um, and it had to be said. Somebody had to say it.
Yeah, somebody had to say
Somebody
it.
had to say it because even if you know that your father has to remarry, like he's gonna have a boy, most likely. Like one of those kids most likely gonna be a boy. And
I also think that Rhaenyra knows this.
mhm,
She knows it based off of everything that's happening around her, being sent out of the small council meetings,
yeah,
not being treated with the respect that she should be treated with as heir. And the fact that again, she said that he didn't choose her, he spurned Damon. So like she knows
yeah.
this. She knows everything Rhaenys is saying is true. She just doesn't want it to be true,
Mhm.
which is
And she's playing
understandable.
this part, right? She's playing this part where she's like trying to be like the lady and the respectable lady who like knows like this is the way that the game is played and this is the role of women. But also like we know that she's got this urge and this drive to prove herself, which is why she suggests things like let's send out the dragon riders, let's take more decisive military action. Um, so she's kind of torn between these two worlds of having to act like a lady and think like a man, or you know, like
Okay.
Steve Harvey.
Yeah.
You guys didn't know I'm wearing my suit right now, my best one.
And her mustache.
Mhm.
She brushed it.
Twirl, twirl, twirl.
Let's get into Damon stealing Prince
Mm,
Balon's egg.
yeah,
Of all the
yeah.
eggs he could have chosen.
That trifling ass Damon. He just likes to start shit.
Yeah, why take a dig at Rhaenyra, who you before you seemingly loved so much?
And why also like do something that reinforces the reason you were kicked out in the first place? You're gonna
Right.
steal the egg of the prince for the day, the heir for a day?
He had to steal his
Really?
egg.
You have to like
Or
didn't he
maybe
ever
he
learn to
didn't know because maybe he doesn't pay attention to things like that. Maybe it was just a
I
coincidence
could
that
see
that's the
that.
egg he took.
Could
So
be.
maybe it
But I thought
isn't
it
a
was really
dig.
smart. I thought
Yeah.
it was super smart of Rhaenyra to ask which egg though,
Yeah.
and to cut everybody else out by speaking in High Valyrian. Be like, no, 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 no. This is
This is
family
between
business.
us.
Yeah.
I thought it was smart
Um,
of her to show up on Dragonstone instead of with
mm,
Otto.
me
Because
too.
what exactly was Otto planning to do against Caraxes?
He wasn't ready to die. That's what I remember. I was like, he was not ready to die. He was relieved, like as surprised as he was that she showed up, he was relieved when she showed up.
Yeah, like what do you do against Caraxes with just armed men with swords? They have no
Nothing.
dragon killing machines. So when
No, it
Caraxes
would have
comes
been
down and just
barbecue on
roasts everyone
Dragonstone.
and leaves, I mean,
Hmm.
again, it would be open war on the king, and the king also
Yeah,
has dragon riders.
yeah. I mean, he would have been forced to, like, at that point, take a stand. But with your hand's gone. You know, your several nights of the King's Guard, the 20 best hands of that house. Then who do you send next?
But when this all happens, Viserys is like, what am I supposed to do? Send him to the wall, put his head on a spike? So you know he's not going to do something
Mhm.
like that. So if he had used
Exactly.
Caraxes and just burned them out and opened war on his brother, do you think Viserys would have sent dragons to just burn down Dragonstone and get him out? Or would he have sent an envoy?
I don't know. I don't know like what action. I mean, at that point, it's like, well, if say that it had happened, I think then you have to like trust Corliss or somebody else like him to step in and kind of take the lead. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, what was going to happen? Like there was no fight. There was no fight. Like you came armed, but there was no
There was never
contest to
going
be
to be a
had.
fight.
Like you're on Dragonstone, but can we talk about real quick how the Dragonstone, like the scenes of Dragonstone in all its glory, you got the salt and smoke,
Oh, I
and you
love
just
it.
this is like the Dragonstone from the books that we've been waiting to see,
Right, right.
It's like misty and mysterious,
Just
and it's
smoky.
just yeah, I loved that. And it had like the entrance gates and stuff. It wasn't just the beach and the castle, right?
Right,
There was a whole structure.
right. I
Dragonstone
also
in
thought
full
the
glory.
dragon CGI was better this week.
I did until that moment when Rhaenyra lands and like they like the green screen was showing for me, but
Mm.
Other than that, I did like it.
Oh yeah, when you see it from afar and they're all little.
Mm-mm. When you see her up close and she's like, when she's
Oh
just
yeah,
landed,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
that
yeah.
moment. I was like, that was the one where I was like,
Those
kind of like had this, disbelief.
that
So,
moment and when you see them from a distance is when I was like, okay, this is now a cartoon. But overall, I thought it was better. Another thing that I thought was not better was the wigs, mainly Lena's wig. Like, just give her white braids. Can you
yeah, they
imagine
could have
her
got,
poor handmaiden trying to detangle that every night?
I don't know why they did that. She could have just had twists like me.
She could have had twists. She could have had locks like her dad.
Braids.
She could have had
Hmm.
it braided like Daenerys. It was smart
Um,
of Rhaenyra to show up because she knows Daemon is not going to hurt her.
Not her. Did you notice while she was asking like which egg it was when they called that emergency meeting of the small council that she was wearing the necklace that he gave her?
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, she was wearing his necklace.
Did you notice that Messiah speaks High Valyrian?
Yes,
Her
I did.
face when he was like, she's to be my wife, and she's
Hmm.
like, what?
She was shocked. She was like, "We didn't talk about this."
And then his conversation with Rhaenyra, she's watching
Hmm.
the whole thing and listening, and she understands it. And so you see that moment she storms away, and I was like,
Yeah,
ooh, she understands High
she
Valyrian.
she's like, "I'm not pregnant, and you never talked to me. We've never talked about getting married. You never proposed. You know." Yeah, I wrote that she was shocked, and then she was just like, "Oh
Well,
no,
she
no,
was
no."
pissed, and it's understandable because later on
Hmm.
she's like, you can play these games with your brother, like they'll just put my head on a spike, and that's true.
It's
She's
true.
right to be pissed.
It's
He's
true.
dragging her into these politics. She wanted no part of that. She
Hmm.
was just trying to, be her side chick and be a side chick and just like live her
Be
life.
safe. Yeah, be mistress. She was cool with that. And the thing is that we see how kind of like Damon has been kind of likening himself to being, not a champion of the small people, but like to know of small folk rather, but like to have a knowledge and an end with like what commoners like think like blah 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 blah. But you see that he's very disconnected from the reality of what would happen to her, just because he doesn't want to believe that would happen to her, because they would for sure just kill her.
Absolutely.
No,
Absolutely, they
not
would
even
just kill
not
her.
thinking.
And it shows his not only entitlement, but he talks about
Hmm.
the other lords being not knowing the outside world and just being in the Red Keep. But like, you
Exactly.
clearly
But here
don't
he
know this
is.
political world where they will
Hmm.
absolutely strip her and have her whipped through the streets naked and then put her head on a spike. Like,
Yep.
that's what they do.
If they don't run through her first on top of all that.
Right. Like when it comes to things like that, they're savages.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she's right to be frightened, especially we learn that she's formerly enslaved. Like she's right to
Hmm.
be frightened. She knows what these people are about, and
She
she
knows what they'll
wants
do to
no
her.
parts.
And it was that gave me a little like it was a little ironic to me to have her telling him about liberation and stuff in this castle that we know later becomes Daenerys, the liberator, who's
Uh-huh.
looking out for people like her,
Right.
who wants to free people like her from people, you know, like him and the others. So I thought that was a really cute, a cool moment.
I was thinking about the people who are for the marriage between Viserys and Lena, and it seemed like
Mhm.
Otto was the only one against it. The Maester thought it was a good match.
I mean, it's a smart move.
And
It's
Lord
like to me,
Strong
it's
tells
a fair.
him she'll
I
mature.
enjoyed that conversation.
And he never says anything in the meetings. He just sits there.
He never says anything in the meetings, and I like that he's like the guy who well, when no one else is in the room, he'll tell you what he's really thinking.
Hmm.
Maybe he doesn't want things to be used against him. Maybe that's a smart play
Or maybe he
in a
just
small
likes to
council.
observe and not shoot from the hip.
Yeah, but to have him say like, listen, like it's a good match. The sea snake is the navy. Like what's not to like about this, essentially.
And
And the
like you said,
maester
she'll
knows that too.
mature. Just hold off on
Exactly.
betting her then.
Hmm.
Bed someone else while she grows up.
Ooh. Yeah,
But
I enjoyed hearing from Lionel Strong because, like you said, it's the first time that we've actually like heard him say anything. Like we got to read on his character.
right. I feel like Viserys was going around asking everyone because he was hoping that someone would tell him not to.
Someone would tell him marry Allison instead.
Right, someone other than
Right.
Otto.
Someone but how could they? Nobody else knew that was happening, and why would they?
Why would
It's
they
not.
choose
It's at
Allison?
Max.
Why would they
Why
choose
would
her?
they choose her? Why would they choose her? She's essentially just like a handmaiden.
Right.
She's a princess's companion, like she has no official role in court. Um, yeah, no, it makes everybody knows that it makes sense. And so maybe it's like for the first time we see him acting out of character and doing what he wants,
When he
dismissing
announced that
everybody
he was getting
else's.
married, Corliss's face, they do that close up of his face. He looked
Hmm.
so pleased,
So
so
pleased.
pleased until,
And
well,
but even Rhaenyra
he's
too, she's like,
nodding,
you know what, all
encouraging him,
right.
right?
She was like, all right, I can accept this. I'm prepared for this inevitability.
And then you see Allison's face. She's scared as hell. So now we know that
Hmm.
he has discussed it with her father and with her before he's made this. Like this wasn't a big surprise.
Hmm.
So this is
No.
another secret she's been keeping from Rhaenyra.
Hmm.
Um,
After all that sweetie sweet talk and the stepped about doing
hmm
this and doing that.
And Rhaenyra rightfully feels betrayed because one, you're my best friend marrying my dad, and two, like it seems like they're a little bit in love with each other.
Hmm.
And now you're marrying my dad.
How long has this been going
How
on?
long has this been going on? Right.
Mm.
So that was
Yeah, man. It's like she thought she had it figured it out, and so did Corliss, and then boom.
Corliss was fucking pissed. Rhaenyra was pissed. And it's like the two people he probably shouldn't piss off the most are
Hmm.
now pissed at him.
Are now pissed off. And it's crazy because like earlier in that meeting with the maesters and where they're maggoting his fingers or whatever, he's saying he's like, well, the people like Corlys wouldn't leave, like he wouldn't dare like lead the crown or blah blah blah. And like I was really excited that you get this moment that we know of so well from Fire and Blood, where Corlys is like, nah, I'm out. I'm
Yeah.
taking my ships and I'm out. With like Hartman says, "Good you guys, I'm going home."
Were you surprised? Well, I guess you wouldn't be surprised since you read Fire and Blood, but I was gonna say, I guess I could ask people listening, were you
Mhm.
surprised to see that he held a meeting with Damon after all of this? I do feel like they've been sowing that seed since the beginning
I
of the
think so
last
too.
episode.
I thought, like, obviously I wasn't surprised, but it. What I was surprised about though was, I mean, we know that Damon and Viserys have like a bit of a rocky relationship, and we know that there's a little bit of beef because of what he did with what basically his actions that led up to him being exiled, plus him like taking Dragonstone, right? Dragonstone, but he's still defensive of his brother because his brother is still the king. You ain't got to talk any kind of way about my brother, the
Right.
king.
I was gonna say not even just because he's king, but just my brother. Like he's
Yeah.
still my older brother. So it's like,
Hmm.
if you complain about your family member all the time and you call them like low life and all kinds of shit, and then somebody else does it, well, now you gotta fight.
Exactly. You can't say it. I can say it. You can't say it.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that it was really good and it was smart for him to check him because there's that moment where where Damon says like, it's not my brother's strongest suit, and he's like, what? What do you mean? He's like being king. And then Corlys looks at him and he's like, you can see that he's kind of weighing whether or not his being there was the right decision. Like,
Mm-hmm.
did he fuck up coming to Damon? But now he's here, so what is he gonna
And we
do?
know that Damon is very open to treason
Mhm.
because he just doesn't care.
He doesn't care, and we get that reference again that we talked about in our last episode about, second sons and how they have to make their own destiny.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a little bit more about the history of House Valerian and how, like, Corlys is the one who built it up. He said, what did he say? He's like, I'm the only like house lord who can say that the wealth of my seat was built off my back,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Tupac voice. Self-made millionaire.
He is treading dangerously
Yeah.
meeting with Damon because Damon is in a like quiet war with his brother right now by
Hmm.
taking Dragonstone, which also puts him in
Hmm.
a bit of a quiet war with Rhaenyra. However, now Rhaenyra is mad at Viserys too.
Hmm.
Um, so Corlys
Remember,
is because this treason, him having this conversation?
I was that's what I was just thinking about. I was like, technically, I think it is because
Because
you left the small council. You basically, like, as far as we can
he
tell,
basically
have
showed
have,
his
have
ass and gave the finger.
given up your position exactly. Like, so you left, and it kind of reminds. I'm trying to remember like which scene it is, if whether it's where it's in the Iron Islands where like all of a sudden, somebody else has all the ships, right? Is that when Euron comes in, they're like, oh, he's like, he basically takes over the entire navy and they have to run away. Um, I don't even actually think if that's the moment that I'm trying to picture, but it does echo something that happens in Game of Thrones. But yeah, I mean, technically, if on paper it is treasonous because you're meeting with someone who has been exiled, right? Who has illegally taken over um, the house seat, the historical seat, who you've already had to have words with about one, talking shit about the unborn, the heir who died, two, who stole a dragon egg, three, is not living with his lady wife and has taken a mistress, who
And
is a
who took
common
up
whore,
arms against the hand of the king.
and took it exactly. So yeah, it is technically
I
treason.
feel like even
He is.
just meeting with him secretly is already treading the treason line. But
Oh,
now
Cersei would have his head.
but now planning to go possibly start a war with the free cities behind the king's back is that
Yeah.
has to be
That has
treasonous.
to be. But it's also like now we've kind of like say, well, what is the king gonna do? Because Rhaenyra did the same thing, right?
Right. He didn't even know she was on Dragonstone. She just up and
Didn't even know
left.
she was gone. So
And I
yeah.
guess, in Viserys's eyes, maybe it's not treason if it works. Rhaenyra went
Yeah.
out there. She wasn't supposed to be there. She disobeyed him and put herself in danger, but she got the egg back.
Hmm.
So, Corlys and Daemon scheme and plot to go fight in the Stepstones. And if they get, they don't win and then the Navy's destroyed and they come back home with their tails between their legs, well, now it's treason. But if they get rid of the Stepstones problem and now the crown is safe,
Hmm.
maybe he won't see it as treason
Maybe he
anymore.
won't see it that way. He has a problem that he was not willing to act against is now solved
And
because
he's
what's
not going
coming
to
next?
execute his
He's
brother.
planning for a royal wedding, right? Once
Right.
again, the problems, the threats to the realm are going to be dismissed in order to focus on happy new
Balls
babies,
and jousts and tourneys and
happy little joust.
yeah, something's wrong
Yeah.
with him.
Oh,
Overall, though, I enjoyed this episode.
me too.
And there was not even any battles. But I'm happy to
You're
like
right.
see intrigue playing out again.
Me
I feel
too.
like
I miss
that's
that
yeah, I feel
so
like that was
much.
missing in the last seasons of Game of Thrones, where like the
Hmm.
intrigue wasn't really interesting because it was so blatant.
Yeah.
Whereas here it's
Yeah.
like seeds are being sown and you can kind of see it happening, but we don't know what's gonna bloom yet.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, like, it makes me wonder about like just for this. Oh, okay, we'll talk about this offline because this is like totally fire and blood book stuff, I guess.
Okay.
Well, you can cut it. You can tell me because what I was gonna say um is that we were talking earlier about choices that they made and like how they like you know
Do you want to
deviated
announce
from.
that's gonna get spoilery right here?
Yes, but you can decide whether or not later if you want to cut this part out.
Okay. Or
Yeah,
move it to the end.
or move it to the end.
Okay.
Um,
Is there anything else that you want to add?
let's see. Just that the only other note that I had that we didn't really talk about was that when they were in the room, um, and when Viserys and Alicent were in the room where he was eating dinner and he was like saying, because I thought at first that he was like, oh, they're trying to get me to marry again. I thought he was talking to Rhaenyra, and then you see he's talking to Alicent,
Yeah.
and you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
wait a second, like you guys discuss things like that.
Right.
And then I forgot what she says, but my note says, "Well played, Allison," and it's just like this is the game punctuated. She's acknowledging that when she knows that he'll have to do it, whatever, whatever. I can't remember her exact line, so I don't want to
She
mess that
said
up.
like
But I
a
just thought it was
queen that is good and kind.
good and kind or something, and it's just like oh yeah, she does that, but then she gives him the gift of the repaired dragon,
Right. Scheming.
which is so very
Do you
strategic.
think Otto was
And
involved with her repairing the dragon?
yes, 100%. I
You
don't
don't
think
think
she
she
thought. I
was just
mean,
trying to be nice because now she likes him too?
no, I think that maybe she was trying to be nice, but I feel like also like you're gonna listen to the hand and the hand's daughter to get this repaired. Maybe because I guess she's nice, but she's also playing her best friend. So I don't know. And the other thing that I noticed is just like the switch in his demeanor, right? He went from being like
Yes.
all cool and like into all of a sudden he's being the king
Yes, he's
again.
like calm, like deepened his voice and
Based in the
everything.
voice.
Yeah, he like straightened his jacket and is like, "Let me use my king voice."
Exactly, you know.
Simba.
Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, no. That's that, I guess.
That's that then.
Yeah, it was a fun episode. I enjoyed seeing it. I enjoyed the intro. Thanks God it's the same song. Cause shout out to Ramin Djawadi for like making the best theme music
Absolutely.
ever.
I am looking forward to some more time jumps because I do want to get to the war. But at the same time, if they want this
Hmm.
to be more than one season, how much of it are we going to see this season? Is it going to end before the
That's what I
actual war
was
starts?
that's what I was wondering when I was making the graphics and stuff today and I was going through like rereading the episode titles. I was like, wait, I don't even know if we get to a
I
war
don't think
in
so.
this because it seems like it's like this seems like this is just going through like the stepstones, right?
Right.
Like the whole Kragos the crab feeder, like leading up to introducing him as a character in conflict and maybe like well
Yeah.
whatever however that gets resolved and
And then
then you
of
don't
course
get
ending
dragon
with
fights until
like
next
the
season.
internal conflict before we get into
Exactly.
a lot of fighting. I'm okay with that.
Exactly. Me
I'm
too.
okay with that. I will post,
Better wigs for season
yeah,
two.
I will post spoilers after this. So if you're listening and don't want spoilers, the spoiler part that I moved is coming in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, prepare for spoilers. Uh, so when we were talking earlier about like the ways that they had shifted the storyline a little bit from the book, the thing that stood out most to me was the fact that Rhaenyra did show up at Dragonstone to confront Daemon, right? Because they're kind of setting them up now to like go to war when we know from Fire and Blood that that's not kind of how the relationship develops. Like there is no like,
There
so
wasn't
is
that friction.
there wasn't that friction. So is this the way of kind of writing out the parts that'll get icky for people in the story? Like that whole relationship that develops and his grooming of her to come by like
Mm.
it's like let's just take that out of the show, period. And like but instead of like doing that, we're just gonna set them up. Like, listen, she's like, your uncle, you're in my castle. He's like, not so you come of age. Like, you don't get to live here yet. But she's confronting him in a way that one, her father is not, and two, like by doing that, even though I felt like some of the looks that between them, I was like, well, there's still love there, like there's still love between her and her uncle. There's still love between her uncle and her father. But does this mean now that they've kind of set each other up to be at odds that we're going to eliminate that whole part of the story? Which I guess I'm
Well,
okay with.
yeah,
But
I'd be fine with that. But also, the stuff about the grooming that we learn is all from Mushrooms accounts, which we can't
mhm,
necessarily rely on. And, they
mhm,
tell us from the get-go that, Mushroom said these things. So, and also Targaryens are perfectly okay marrying uncle to niece. So when she
mhm,
is of age, if she's still unmarried, which in which case we know that he's her second husband anyway, it
yeah,
it is possible that he was not grooming her and that they
mhm,
really, did love each other as family. But since they're Targaryens and when they're older, it's something that could make
yeah.
sense.
And that's what I was just like, in the first episode that we see them talking to each other, it's like, yeah, it's probably they probably assumed that they would marry.
Right.
Like she probably thought so, and he probably thought so, even
But yeah,
though
once his
it
wife's
wasn't.
died, what other Targaryen is there for her to marry?
Yeah,
Once his wife and her husband are dead.
unless he was considering marrying her to Otto Hightower, which,
No, that would never happen. It would just
yeah.
be
So
stupid.
I guess she would have had to marry Laenor. Well, we'll save that for another time. So yeah, yeah, that was the only thing that the other thing that like kind of stood out. I was like, oh, wait a second. So are we setting that up so that part of the story doesn't happen? Which, like I said, I don't necessarily mind. But also, speaking of characters we didn't see, like I would have liked to have a mushroom.
I was thinking that
I,
last
I would
episode,
have
like
because
even
we
just
we
like
don't have
walking
any
by in the
trolls.
background so that we know he's there.
Yeah, he's
He
there.
doesn't
We
even
didn't
have
get
to have
mushroom. We don't get
lines.
patch face.
Yeah, I would have been okay with the mushroom just like passing by and, or doing something like walking by juggling or something just so that we know he's
Yeah,
there. He doesn't even
yeah,
have to
little
have
nod.
lines.
Yeah,
I've been Tanya.
I'm always Nikki.
and we are 1,000 Eyes in One. Join us again next week as we talk about episode 3, whose title I already forgot, but that's okay because the list is already online and you can find it. To find previous episodes, go to thousandeyespodcast.com. You can also find us on YouTube, 1,000 Eyes in One podcast. And if you'd like to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter as 1,000 Eyes One, Facebook and Instagram, 1,000 Eyes in One. If you're interested in our speculative fiction book club, that is Wine on an Empty Stomach on Instagram. We'll see you later.
Bye.